Thank you, Caroline. Good afternoon to you all. Good morning to you all. I think we welcome you all to this very interesting and exciting webinar organized by the Africa Natural Capital Accounting Community of Practice in partnership with US government. And the theme today we have is protecting East African natural capital, the cost of inaction. So we would want to give a few minutes for other participants to join. We can give 2 to 3 minutes and we will start in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Thank you.
And maybe I can jump in and just ask folks, if you wish, you can change your name. It would be good to have you change your handle with your name if you have not done so, so that we all know one another's, at least in name. Thank you.
Committee, I think you've changed to something else, huh?
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah, just some quick house cleaning. So for the Zoom, most of you will be on mute, and that's okay. And as you come in, please just note that you can ask your questions. There's a Q&A feature. So just use that. We encourage you to ask questions and comments and look at other questions and upvote them if you want. And so we can make this more interactive. So please use the Q&A feature rather than the chat. We encourage you to use the Q&A. The chat you can use if you have, say, maybe a technical issue. But let's keep all the questions and comments in the Q&A mostly. Okay, and also we'll be recording. We're recording now. We'll be starting shortly. Just asking for another minute or so for folks to come in as they switch from the previous activities.
I think we should start. We have quite a good number. And I think just to manage and to be able to keep time, let's start our webinar. Dear Africa NCA Community of Practice members, dear esteemed speakers today, dear participants, we welcome you to this webinar with the title Protecting East Africa's Natural Capital, the Cost of Inaction, presented by the Economics of Natural Capital in East Africa program, funded by the United States Agency for Development, USAID. We would like to thank all the members and all the partner institutions that are financing and are supporting the community of practice. The community of practice has been in existence for the last 1 year. It was officially launched in July, 1st July 2020. And this July 2021, we celebrated the first year. And we are pleased to welcome also another partner institution that are going to share their experience in the space of natural capital accounting, USAID. We welcome you all. Thank you all for accepting to be with us and to share your knowledge and your experiences within the work that you're doing in East Africa and across Africa. We would also like to recognize the new members, leaders that joined the Africa Natural Capital Accounting Community of Practice Secretariat. We have Dr. Mimako Kobashi, Senior Environment Economist, and Ms. Ngao Mubanga, Environmental Specialist, as the TTLs at the moment, leading the Community of Practice and the Secretariat. As you all know, members and those who are present today, this is a very exciting topic today, and we would like quickly to dive into it. We have 1 hour and a half to cover all the agenda items as we shared in the invitation. So to make sure that we get a smooth run, it is very important that we mention some of the points, rules to consider all speakers and participants for a smooth webinar. First is that please keep your microphone mute to prevent any background noise. We have many participants here today, so turning off the camera will avoid any distractions. Please mute mobile phones, turn off notification sounds, and minimize other applications. Towards the end after the presentations, please just be informed that there will be a Q&A session after the presentations and the welcome remarks. So please do not interrupt speakers while they are presenting. You may type in the question while the speakers are speaking and during the Q&A session in the chat window, as Mr. Kamuti said and informed us, so that can be addressed later. We have someone in the team who will collect your questions from the chat box and pass them to the speakers. After the presentations today, you receive a copy of the presentation and the link to the recorded session. So be mindful that all the information that we are going to be providing today and we are going to be receiving from the presenters and the speakers will be shared by you via your email as we sent you the invitation. So today's agenda, it's a tight agenda, but I hope that all the speakers here today and presenters will respect the time allocated to them. So the first speaker on the agenda, we will have welcome remarks from the World Bank, from Ms. Noreen Beg. She's the lead environmental specialist and regional safeguards coordinator for the East Africa from the World Bank, Environment and Natural Resource, Blue Economy, Global Practice. Ms. Noreen will make the welcome remarks on behalf of Dr. Ian Shuka, who has not been able to be with us today. He is the practice manager for the Environment and Natural Resources and Blue Economy Global Practice from the World Bank. Next, we will welcome remarks from the representative from USAID, Ms. Tihenyo Kangara. She is USAID East African Climate Change and Resilient Program Management Specialist. She's also act as the US Program Manager for the Economics of Natural Capital in ESC project, which will be presented today. Ms. Tihenyo is a natural resource management practitioner with 16 years of experience in managing agriculture, water, environment, climate change, adaptation, and resilience practice programs across the region. And the next presenter that we will have, who will have the main presentation, will be Dr. Nicholas Oguge. He is the Chief of Party for the Economics of Natural Capital in East Africa project Nairobi, Kenya. As Chief of Party for Natural Capital Accounting Project, Dr. Nicholas brings knowledge and experience useful in generating evidence and translating information that address conservation goals to policy actions. Dr. Nicholas has 37 years in nature conservation and academia in East Africa, Belgium, New Zealand, and Dr. Nicholas will be sharing the progress and findings of the economics of natural capital in East African project. We will then have a Q&A session to be moderated by myself, Peter Katanisa, and Dr. Nicholas will be coming back to provide any clarification from your questions and comments. Finally, as we come to the end of this session, webinar, we will welcome session speakers, Ms. Tihenyo Kangara and Ms. Norin, to provide reflections and takeaway messages from this webinar. So thank you all. That's the agenda that we have. And due to the time constraint that we have and limited time, I would like now to take this time to welcome Ms. Norin Beg to give her remarks. Ms. Norin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. And again, Dr. Shukur apologizes that he was unable to be here, and he would like to thank you all, our partner institutions, along with the COP family. We would like to thank partner institutions, individual members and countries for making this community of practice possible and for contributing and providing a platform to discuss policies and national development plans related to natural resources, environment, and climate change through the lenses of implementing NCA tools across Africa. So this July marked a year of the Africa NCA community of practice being in existence. The membership continues to grow and currently stands at 48 African countries and 483 individual members. It's our hope that the COP provides a platform that increases cooperation and support between countries on using NCA and strengthening the capacity of governments to use NCA for decision-making and the collaboration of all key stakeholders at all levels in the development and use of NCA in Africa. So in today's webinar, we're very pleased to have a team from USAID who will be presenting the results of the report, Protecting Natural Capital in East Africa, the Cost of Inaction. This report presents a comprehensive assessment of the economic value of East Africa's numerous natural resources. It's a very timely report as it seeks to improve the conservation and management of iconic and important transboundary East African wildlife landscapes by providing policymakers and advocates with information on their economic value. So the work is very relevant to the work that we're doing at the World Bank. For example, the World Bank is implementing the Global Program on Sustainability in Zambia, Uganda, Rwanda, Nigeria, Morocco, Kenya, Ghana, and Chad. And this program will integrate into environmental sustainability into public and private decisions by providing high quality data, analytical tools, and technical assistance for measuring and valuing natural capital and ecosystem services. And we are extremely keen and continuing to share our knowledge and exchanges to coordinate and improve each other's activities. So the report being presented today demonstrates the importance of protecting natural capital. And through an assessment in 4 key transboundary landscapes in East Africa, the Great East African Plains of southern Kenya and northern Tanzania, the northern savannas of South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, and adjacent Mount Elgon, the Albertine Rift forests along the Albertine Rift Valley of Burundi, Rwanda, and southwest Uganda, and the Ruwero Mugusera Akagera wetlands of northern Burundi, eastern Rwanda, and northwest Tanzania. The report has reviewed that it will cost the region almost $11 billion per year over the next few decades if there is a failure to protect this natural capital. Given this evidence, we cannot overemphasize the importance of natural assets for sustainable development, and we therefore call upon everyone present here from the numerous countries attending to take the information and share it back in your respective institutions. And this is the only way to make sure that the NCA work under the community of practice grows and influences in a practical manner national development and decision making. Thank you all for joining and your interest in this important webinar focusing on advancing the topic in Africa. I'm sure that the outcomes of this discussion will be fruitful and will advance our work. Finally, let me thank the World Bank team that is behind the work and managing the COP Secretariat. That's Mimako Kobayashi and Dengao Mbanga, who are leading the Secretariat, and of course, Peter Katanitha as the coordinator. I'd also like to thank Leona, David, and Yasmina. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending and our panelists, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion and even more the questions and answers. Thank you so much, and over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Ms. Noreen. It's a great pleasure to have you here, and thank you for those wonderful remarks. Indeed, the importance of natural capital accounting can never be overemphasized. The cost almost of $11 billion USD. If countries don't work together, that cannot be achieved, cannot be realized, and we cannot have sustainable natural resource management within the region and across Africa. So I'll now get back to Ms. Tienyo also to provide her opening remarks.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you again for allowing us to be here. Good afternoon, colleagues, and good morning to those who might be also joining us from different time zones. Well, for the purpose of bandwidth, I'm going to have put my video off for now, but you'll be able to hear me much better without it. So this is a program, the conservation and management of natural capital in East Africa is a USAID program that we have designed, taking into context that this is a region endowed with rich biodiversity and natural resources, as Noreen has just pointed out. And looking through this collective natural capital within this region, we cannot ignore that the natural capital for this region is a critical asset for the region's sustainable socioeconomic growth and resilience, because it provides ecosystem services, economic growth contributions, as well as human well-being. This is also a region that is known for its nature-based tourism industry and is heavily dependent on both government and community protected areas. And therefore, this is seen as important points for us in terms of designing a program that contributes towards conserving and protecting the region's transboundary areas. Our program's geographic scope is really generally around the 6 EAC countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. But we're also looking at other countries within the Western Indian Ocean through some programs that we intend to develop covering the coastal and marine ecosystems. Next slide. The various transnational challenges that the program addresses includes habitat degradation, loss of transboundary wildlife migratory corridors, poaching and wildlife trafficking across porous borders. We're also addressing vulnerability to extreme weather and climatic events, as well as unharmonized regional policies and legal frameworks on natural resource management. Next slide. So the program itself is well anchored on USAID's new Regional Development Cooperation Strategy for the period 2020 to 2025, which basically looks at addressing, or a vision that addresses, a stable, prosperous, and self-reliant East African region. Our new RDCS, as we call it, can be found, the document can be found on our website, and we'll also be happy to share it here. So through this strategy, USAID intends to promote East African leadership for regional resilience, prosperity, and stability. If you are very much familiar with USAID's programs, historically, we have partnered with 3 regional economic commissions, that is the East African Community, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. However, in this new strategy, we are expanding our partnerships at national, subnational, and international levels, and we intend to partner with public and private sectors, organizations, including research organizations and academia, as well as community organizations, civil society, and the private sector. So through this new strategy, the mission is open to collaborate, co-create solutions that support strengthening the region's sustainability and self-reliance. So in order for us to achieve this 5-year goal, we have developed 2 development objectives. One is on regional resilience, and the second one is on advancing the capacities of market systems, which is well outlined here on the slide. The program which we're talking about today, under which this presentation shall be made, is well anchored and contributes towards these 2 development objectives. The IRs, or the immediate results, as you can see, are well also outlined here. One of the IRs looks at capacity of communities, institutions, and systems to jointly plan for, respond, and recover from shocks and threats threatened. The second one looks at regional food security ecosystems enhanced. And the third one is really the conservation and management of transboundary natural resources improved, which is basically what our program is about and is the genesis of the natural capital study. The second development objective really is around capacity of regional market systems advanced, and the activities under that development objective are anchored and conducted through our Office of Economic Growth Initiative, which is a separate office, which focuses on improving regional trade systems. Next slide. So honing onto our overall regional environment program, I would like to start by first stating that we're still under design. We have a new environment strategy that's under design, but basically what we have here in front of you is really highlights of our results framework, which basically is to inform you where exactly this activity, which is the natural capital activity, which presentation you're going to hear today, comes from. But then basically to give you a whole synopsis of the program, our key focus really will be to contribute towards investments in critical transboundary landscapes. We also intend to contribute towards implementation, collaboration, and cooperation of key regional policies, strategies, and laws. Particularly with the EAC, we're interested in supporting the EAC achieve results under their protocol on environment and natural resource management, as well as the anti-poaching counter wildlife trafficking strategy and the transboundary ecosystem management bill. Through this program, we also intend to have results that will contribute towards behavior change, particularly looking at market availability and consumption of wildlife reduced, so really honing in on bushmeat trade, and also enhancing the perceived value of living wildlife. In addition to that, this program will also look at supporting the integrity of critical transboundary ecosystems, particularly looking at particular areas that the natural capital study has honed into. And taking us forward, we also hope to start working in the marine sector, helping the various countries within the Western Indian Ocean achieve some of their priorities within the blue economy agendas. Next slide. So without any further ado, I would like to just start by, again, just talking a little bit about the study in itself. It focuses on 4 areas, 4 regional transboundary areas, and Dr. Oguge will articulate more about that study. And Noreen also mentioned in the beginning a little bit about the various areas that have been mentioned. I will also like to state here that the selection of these sites were done in collaboration with the EAC partner states. Various directors contributed to the prioritization process, which led to us then honing into these 4 particular areas. So these areas have been well anchored within the medium-term investment plans of these partner states and have been identified as critical areas going forward. Next slide. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Oguge to then make the presentation. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you. Before Dr. Oguge takes over, I just want to appreciate that presentation from Chihenyo and state that, like she said, it is a program and it is being undertaken by a consortium Environmental incentives is one of the partners, and our focus is on the doing two things. That is performing the analytical study and policy advocacy on the economic valuation of natural capital for East Africa, which is what Dr. Guge is just about to present. I would also like to add that this work has been done through a lot of stakeholder engagement so that we can have buy-in. We can also continue to connect about natural capital accounting, because it's very important, looking at the Dasgupta report, looking at even the agreements and everything that is happening right now. So with that, Dr. Guge, you're welcome, and thank you. And thank you to everybody who has attended. Put your questions in the Q&A. Over.
Thank you very much, Chihenyo, for a very good introduction. Thank you very much, Noreen, for setting the stage. And thank you, Caroline, for reintroducing me. I just want to find out, first of all, can you see my slide? Is it visible? Excellent.
Yes,
thank you.
visible.
Okay, so now, as Chihenyo said, this particular project is within the conservation and management of natural capital in East Africa program. And this afternoon or morning, I'd like to just take you through the project overview and discuss a little bit some of our findings, maybe bring out what's at stake, and perhaps look at how we can move towards action planning, and then maybe just mention a little bit on the next steps. So the project overview is that our goal was essentially to assess the economic value of natural landscapes that were, of course, as Chihenyo indicated, prioritized by the East African community and partner states. And after that, we also undertook scenario assessment to figure out what will happen if we fail to protect these extremely valuable landscapes. And as also mentioned by Caroline, we did this by engaging stakeholders at different levels. And the idea is that in this engagement, we can come up with actions that transcend boundaries, but also transcend sectors, and also enjoins communities and the private sector. Now, some key highlights about this project is that it's based on a landscape approach, and a landscape approach builds on the promise that combining conservation, development, and human well-being is possible. Now, based on that, we undertook this work to fill definitely what was considered as an evidence gap. So we took a big leap, and what we're going to share today is the findings. Now, the landscape approach also takes into consideration the fact that nature doesn't conform to political boundaries and will spread between countries. And when you're dealing with those issues, you also work across sectors. Now, just to reiterate again, those are the 4 landscapes we worked on. Noreen has mentioned them. Chihenyo has given more details around them. But just to indicate that the Great East African Plains, which is on the Kenya-Tanzania transboundary area, has got nearly 10 protected areas, and they're all very, very important, just for the community livelihood, but also for the tourism in the region. And of course, moving to Mount Elgon is an important water catchment area and supports the northern part of Uganda, Kenya, and going into South Sudan. The Alberton Rift is very, very rich in species, but also that's the only place we get the mountain gorilla. So it's very valuable not just to the region, but globally. And the wetlands are very critical in ensuring that there's less pollutants getting into Lake Victoria and therefore supporting fisheries downstream of where it is. So how did we approach this study? We used the systems of environmental economics accounting. And this is a standardized system that produces internationally comparable statistics. And just to let you know that recently, the final draft of this approach was adopted by the UN Statistical Commission in March this year. Now, you also need to know that it's really not an accounting exercise. It uses more spatial data, etc., but it provides building blocks for which the natural capital accounting system can be built on. And we know that this African NCA has have implementation initiatives across Africa, and therefore we believe that our finding is going to make a contribution to the various countries that is adopting this within the East African Community region. I also wanted to point out that on the 9th of September this year, the African Development Bank, together with the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, came up or launched the NC484, which is a program that aims to mainstream natural capital approaches to African development finance. Now, what that means is that the evidence that we've generated from this particular study will be useful, into the, to be put into the region's natural capital accounting system. Now, the program we used basically has three typologies when looking at ecosystem services. That is provisioning services, cultural services, and regulating services. Our particular study specifically looked at 9 ecosystem services within these three typologies. And our presentation is going to be on these 9 ecosystem services. When we are assessing or quantifying the values, economic values, we use different approaches. And one of the approaches we used was the INVEST software developed by Stanford University. And that was used for purposes of determining the flow regulation, soil erosion control, and water quality amelioration. When it came to carbon, we estimated the social cost of carbon. Now, this basically estimates the damages that would be incurred under climate change if we release that carbon from the soils and from the vegetation which currently harvest them. Now, to do this, we need to undertake socioeconomic predictions. In other words, we need to look at what the population projections is for the region and how the economy of these different countries are going to be projected. But also we looked at climate projections, and in here we try to determine how will the climate respond to emissions, but also how long will carbon dioxide remain in the atmosphere, and the kind of extreme weather events that's likely to come out from such impacts. We also look at benefits and costs. For instance, how will climate change affect agriculture? And then we also look at the discount rates, since the benefits from policies tend to be realized many years later. So in case we have a low discount rate, it indicates that we are willing to spend more today to protect future generations. Now, let's see how this social cost of carbon can be monetized and how we can apply it to make policy decisions. Now, assuming that a country has a new regulation on energy. For instance, we want to move to offshore wind generation. And that might cost the country, say, about $500 million, say, to generate, let's say, 600 megawatt hours of electricity. Now, at the same time, that would, over a period of 30 years, that would cut our carbon emission by about 1,000 metric tons. And for Kenya, for instance, the social cost of carbon rate at the moment is $0.61 per ton of carbon dioxide. So what that means is that the benefit would be us taking the amount of carbon that is being cut over the period and multiplying that by the social cost of carbon. Now, in this case, that comes to about $610 million. So that means that there is a difference of about $110 million between the investment we made and what has been saved from cutting down the carbon. And because this is amount of money more than investment cost, we can say that that policy is justified. So this is how you can monetize the social cost of carbon that we generated in this study, and how you can use it to make policy decisions in a country. So in our study, we use the situation model, and I'm just going to talk about how we went about this. So if you look at the blue box in the middle, that's our starting point, because we start by looking at the landscape factors. And the landscape factors would include things like the habitat types, the level of degradation, etc., and also the various species within it and wildlife. Now, after mapping this, then we undertake the modeling to come up with the value, the economic value. So those are the ecosystem services values, which of course we broke down into cultural, provisioning, and regulating. And we did look at regulating as carbon and regulating as non-carbon. Now, that provides us with the stock of ecosystem that we have in the region. And then, or rather the stock of natural capital, I beg your pardon. And then we need to determine what are the flows of this natural capital in the region. And by that, we looked at the impact on the, or what we can call the downstream impacts. How is it going to, or how is it impacting the economy? How is this impacting livelihoods of people and other components that are required? How is it affecting the private sector, for instance? Then we also know that this natural capital have certain number of threats, and we looked at the threats and determined the kind of threats and what are driving those threats. We then looked at scenarios of the impact of carbon, for instance, the impact of demography, and if we don't change our policies, if we continue under business as usual, what's going to happen 30 years from now? How is it going to impact the landscape factors, ecosystem services, and the flow of natural capital? So I'm just going to give you a brief on the findings from those analyses. So one of the key findings is that the landscapes, based on the 2018 as a base year, we found that the landscape's total value to the region is $10.9 billion. And this is, of course, spread across the different ecosystem services. Specifically, we found that regulating services has or provides the most value of this landscape. We live in this landscape and we destroy them, but we don't realize the value they're providing us by regulating various services. We also found that in 2018, the landscapes generated up to $1.2 billion in tourism, which is great contribution to the region. However, that only accounted for 11% of the value. So that shows you how important other components are in this particular landscape. However, we also need to note that tourism generated a lot of jobs during that period, clocking over 786,000 jobs in 5 countries. We didn't have South Sudan information when we generated this, and hopefully that's going to be addressed soon. But we also found that tourism can generate more. There was $1.5 billion in untapped component of tourism because of consumers' willingness to pay. So tourism remains very important to the region, despite the fact that it's actually just contributing about 11% to the value of this landscape. Again, if we looked at the various components, we're now getting into monetary values that we got from these areas. We find that this landscape contributed between 3% and 9% to the GDP of the various countries in the region. However, we need to take a step and consider what's going on. One of the things we found is that the per capita value of natural capital is on the decline in this region, and this is also reflected on the produced capital. So if you look at these maps and consider the red line, that gives us the natural capital. If you consider the blue line, that gives us the produced capital. And you can see where the natural capital is declining, such as in Tanzania, Kenya, in Burundi, then the blue line is equally declining. But we can also see where there is relative projected stability in natural capital, like in Rwanda and Uganda, the produced capital is also relatively modulated. So if we lose our natural capital, we'll definitely be losing our produced capital. And so we need to take that into consideration. Now, this particular landscape were even more valuable to the global community. The global value of this landscape came to about 608 billion. So that is a very important value, and most of this was because of the value of carbon that is stored in these particular landscapes. So what's at stake? We looked at the top threats, and we found that they're generally around unsustainable land use, over-extraction of resources, but also the triple effect of COVID, which brought down the tourism particularly. We know the effect of climate, and also we are seeing quite a bit of conflict in the region. And this has been reported a lot in northern Kenya lately. Now, we know that these particular threats are impacting the natural environment in different ways, particularly degradation of habitats, and also lack of maybe destruction of habitat connectivity, the water flow, the decline even in wildlife diversity in some areas. And that obviously is going to affect ecosystem services. It's going to impact our tourism revenue moving forward. Of course, it has impacted already considering the COVID situation. It's also going to affect the regulating capacities of these landscapes, and decline in harvestable resources as because the provisioning services that we saw accounted to about 1.8 billion in the particular region, and this is also going to decline, and then we get into more devastating situation like loss of jobs, loss of livelihoods, and even problems with food and water security, as well as negative health of the people in general. Now, let me give you one example of a very specific activity happening in the Albertine Rift, and or what we are projecting and a business as usual scenario. Now, first and foremost, I must say that the Albertine Rift is experienced a more resilient tourism model in the region. And this particular model is based on high-end and low-impact tourism. And this is around the gorilla trekking tourism. And this is making the tourism there more resilient, irrespective of the impacts we're currently seeing, but that might change. This is because we are seeing deforestation in some of these areas. And this is happening even within protected area systems. And that's likely to impact these various habitats, including habitat suitable for gorilla, which is particularly important to sustain this particular model here. It's also going to impact other regulatory services in the region. Now, one of the things, again, that we need to point out is currently the investment in protected area systems in the entire Africa, not just East African region, is currently at about 10% of what it should be. We see that there was a study by Lindsay recently that showed that in protected areas that has lions, then we need to be spending about $2,000 per square kilometer annually. However, we are only spending $200 per square kilometer. So this is underfunding by about 1,000% deficit. And this needs to be undertaken and need to be looked at. But it also found that most of this funding is actually by national governments and philanthropy. And there's very little private sector contribution. So what does that tell us, and how can we move towards an action planning? Now, our thinking is that we need to improve investment in natural capital by undertaking 5 activities. 1, we need a shift in investment decision making. For instance, we need to think about ecological fiscal transfer as a way of supporting natural systems in a devolved way. We need a revolution in planning. For instance, we need to lower barriers and associated risks to investment in biodiversity-friendly sectors. That's how we can bring in private sector more to invest in nature-based approaches. We need to harness private sector resilience as well. So as we encourage private sectors to come in, we need to generate financial vehicles that are appropriate. For instance, blending public and commercial finances to de-risk borrowing for these private sectors. We need a revolution in understanding among all stakeholders. I'm sure this is one thing that perhaps all of you would agree with. We need awareness creation, not just among communities, not just among the policymakers, but also among the private sector and all the actors in the region. And lastly, we need innovative implementation strategy. And one possible strategy is investing in nature-based solution. So what is nature-based solution that we're talking about here? So it is a system that was coined by IUCN, and it is something that perhaps we need to be considering. It talks about action to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystems in ways that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively to provide both human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So a suggestion here is that investment need to be based on nature solutions. And this could be either to protect an area, restore, or build infrastructure, or management of an area. But whatever it is, it needs to look at societal challenges by addressing issues around food and water security, but as well as environmental challenges by addressing climate change and biodiversity loss. And ultimately, this kind of investment must provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits, but they'll not be sustainable if they do not provide earnings to the investors, the private sector. Just an example, For instance, you can have an agribusiness company that invest in land restoration technique with smallholder farmers to ensure a healthy long-term supply chain. So in the process, the agribusiness is getting sustainable supply of material because the people they're working with are ensuring that they're taking care of nature. So that brings us to our theory of change. And the theory of change that we are suggesting here, let me see if I can move there. Okay, the theory of change that we are having here really looks at, first of all, it's applicable to all the four landscapes because this landscape have got similar threats and they share widely a lot of cultural issues together. But what we need is to align our interests. For instance, we need to implement this nature-based solution that will align interests of people on the ground with nature. But at the same time, we align that with businesses because businesses must make a profit. But for us to do that, we need to make policies and plans that will incentivize these approaches. And we need to have partner states working across boundaries, but also working across sectors to manage this shared natural world. Over and above that, we need to ensure that we can diversify community livelihood approaches to empower them. And this can be done in a way that we mobilize private sector investment among communities. Now, if we combine that, we are likely to have better land management and more sustained resource extraction, and also build resilience of these communities to climate, conflict, and COVID. And that can lead to improved, or restored healthy ecosystems. And subsequently, communities and businesses can then continue, enjoying materials from these natural systems. And this can create jobs and economic well-being. Now, this this strategic approach that we're talking about can be looked at 3 levels. We can look at it at the regional or transboundary level, at the national, subnational level, and at community level. So in case we're looking at, at the transboundary level, we need therefore to have harmonized transboundary management plans to capture interests of different partner states and sectors for sustainable use of natural capital. At the sub-national level, we need to identify and enhance public-private partnerships that incentivize the integration of biodiversity conservation into subnational development plans to conserve natural infrastructure. And we need to empower communities to manage natural resources through sustainable enterprises and activities supported by innovative private sector financing models. Let me give some examples for the community engagement. For instance, in case of whether it is the forested areas like Ableton Rift or the plains, like the East African plains or the wetlands, we have possible enterprises that we can be involved in. And we also have different potential funding models that can be applied to this. For instance, in the forest, we can have sustainable silver arable agroforestry that also deals with non-timber forest products and make a community come up with handicraft and perhaps dairy and honey production, for instance. But at the same time, across all these areas, we have the issue of carbon, and carbon can have additional funding or additional income to the landscapes across all these different areas. Let me give you just one last example. And this is based on activity going on in Mount Elgon. And we have what we call the Livelihood Fund. And this Livelihood Fund was commenced in 2016 to combat deforestation and a sustainable attachment practice. But at the same time, we are looking at boosting the local economy. They've worked with so many farmers and are covering quite a large area, and have been joined 15 cooperatives with various tasks on the ground. But the idea is this: while they're actually combating deforestation, while they're working at sustainable system in agriculture, they're also creating sustainable supply chain. And the sustainable supply chain is with Brookside Dairy, which is a milk company. So the fact that they're working to sustain the environment, the farmers are earning, but then also it's being supported by a supply chain that is going to be sustainable. So I think that I can only now tell of the next steps, which is having drafted our action plan, we need to now engage different stakeholders at the regional level, at the partner state level. We need to engage a lot of the private sectors, development partners, and the umbrella community association to ensure that we work together to sustain these very important landscapes. And thank you very much. And defer back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nick, for that comprehensive sharing of the project findings and the threats, the challenges, and the proposed solutions on how to manage this diverse ecosystem around the East African region. A very well-known region in terms of tourism, in terms of its endemic natural ecosystem services. And we are very pleased that there is work which is looking not only in one country, but looking at transboundary management of natural resources. There's a saying that nature does not know any boundaries, does not know politics. So it's a great opportunity to see such a project of such magnitude being implemented across the East African region. And I'm here to attest that I've been part of the people who have been consulted from the Rwanda perspective in terms of giving my views and the challenges I see in Rwanda in terms of managing natural resources and natural capital. So this is very exciting opportunity, and I'm very sure that the Africa Natural Capital Accounting Community of Practice members here are going to learn much, and they will take back some of the lessons to their respective regions, because we promote African Natural Capital Accounting management, but also we encourage and advocate for regional management of such natural capital. We have the ECOWAS, the West African part, we have the southern part, we have the central region, and we have the northern part. So and we are very pleased to inform you that most of the members here in the community of practice come from all those regions, and they will learn much from this. And we've seen that in the chat that there's a lot of exciting questions and comments and recommendations. So if you allow me, Nick, and all presenters, let's now go into the session of Q&A. We will start with some of the questions that have come up in the chat. The first question comes from Khadija. Khadija, she's asking, is there any alignment between this project and SDGs or Paris Agreement on climate change agenda? And a follow-up question, she asks, what tools were used for economic evaluation when these non-market price were evaluated? So Nick, I think we'll go question by question, so that after that, then we will open again floor for members to ask questions directly. Nick, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Adija, for bringing up the issue of SDGs and the global climate agenda. Yes, there is these are really aligned with the various components of the SDG almost across the board. I wouldn't necessarily point to any given one, but also, over and above that component, we know that we are having the climate change conference that is happening in Glasgow in a couple of weeks' time or 2 weeks' time, and that is COP26. And when we are really talking about the social cost of carbon, we really are addressing or providing evidence so that the government in this region can use that to address the climate agenda that following the Paris Agreement, because this is just going to sort of strengthen some components of the Paris Agreement. And when we are addressing the issue of food security, water security, we are addressing various aspects of the SDG. In terms of valuing the non-monetary component, I think I indicated that we used INVEST. First of all, the kind of data you have tend to be spatial. That's why you're mapping the region, and you're determining the various components of habitat quality in the region. And you're also getting climate data, you're getting population data, etc. And then you're using modeling to come up with those values. So there is a lot of data types, but also modeling using INVEST that was likely used for various kind of non-monetary value. And of course, for social cost of carbon, I think I also indicated what we used for purposes of determining that. Peter.
Thank you very much, Nick. And a follow-up question on exactly where you landed. On Stuart is asking, how did you calculate the social cost of carbon? Does this include costs in terms of society? That's poverty, loss of resilience from changed ecosystems. And is there a change here that is seriously understated when we look at wider system consequences? That's from Stuart. Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. When we looked at the social cost of carbon, so the first important component that is looked at is the socioeconomic predictions. So the socioeconomic predictions in a country, we're going to look at things like the population in the country. This is really GDP-driven kind of thing. How is the economy in that country growing? And how much carbon emission is going to be resulting from the different components that the country is undertaking to grow its economy. So those are the socioeconomic predictions that must be taken into consideration. Then you take into consideration the climate projections. And when we're talking about that, we are looking at the kind of emissions and how the climate is likely to respond. So for a given country, what is likely to impact them in terms of the extreme weather events? For instance, in Kenya now, we're having severe drought in most part of the country. I don't know whether that's happening in other countries around the region, but that is something then taken into consideration in determining that. Then we look at the benefits and costs. What is this going to happen, therefore, to our agriculture? How does additional warming affect our energy use, for instance, and the productivity of people? So those are taken into consideration. And then you bring in the discount rate, from policy perspective. Are you going to, put in money now to protect the future, or are you going to continue with business as usual? If you're putting in more money now, that is no discount. If you're putting more money, if you're putting less money now and continue with business as usual, that's high discount, and that impacts the value. So that is how we determine the social cost of carbon. And for this region, it was basically around $0.61 per ton of carbon. And if you do the same in the USA, it comes to about maybe $56 per ton of carbon. So that brings in the socioeconomic variability in different countries that gives different values for the social cost of carbon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that elaborate answer. Then from Manasa is asking, did you develop the physical tables for the respective ecosystem services and related flows? And how do we integrate them into the GDP calculations? That's a question from Manasi. But also another question is saying that I noted the decline in per capita value of natural capital beyond the loss and degradation of natural capital. Could it be there that there is also for interventions to enhance inclusiveness and equity in access and benefits from natural capital accounting?
Okay, I think the Manasseh one, I didn't get the question. So perhaps just start with that first.
Yeah.
What was Manasseh asking?
Yeah, Manasseh is asking, did you develop the physical supply tables for the respective ecosystem services and related flows? And how do we integrate that into GDP calculations?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And you know, for us to undertake this particular you know, kind of study, just a second. I just want to. There is a lot of information. Just if we want, for instance, to look at the you know, just to assess, say, the flow regulation of the flow regulation in a given environment, then there is a ton of material that we need to look at. For instance, that will require a lot of information. You know, like we need to look at the you know, the soil, water in the region. We need infiltration rate, for instance. We need to look at if there's any obstruction in the area, soil structure, you know, and you know, landscape structure, and you know, different components in the area, like the woodland, the grassland, and so on. The evapotranspiration rate, the rainfall, in case there's any you know, things like irrigation and so on. So all this information is necessary for us to put together and use that in the modeling. Now, you realize that this particular study is you know, short-term study. Therefore, that kind of data is not something we could collect during our period, but we had to use existing you know, data from various organizations. We used information from the water development authorities, information from different government agencies, and the information we're getting were largely from different partner states, who are then giving us information that we could put in the model and to build what Manasseh is talking about. And the second one was if the decline, the loss of produced capital is affecting individuals. Sorry, could you just repeat the second question?
It's affected the intervention to enhance inclusiveness and equity in access and benefits from natural capital.
Yeah. So you see, all these things are quite interlinked, and you know, the produced capital, in most cases, we are getting the natural capital as raw material to move to the produced capital. So if one is destroyed, the other is likely to be not, you know, very well taken care of. But over and above that, we need a situation whereby we have a sustainable way of capturing that natural capital and converting it into produced capital, and doing that using what we can refer to as green jobs, which can therefore be inclusive of people, whether, you know, of different gender, different age groups, and different socioeconomic groups. That's the only way we can, you know, we can do it by looking at nature-based approaches that will provide green solutions. So yes, if you decline your natural capital, and you're likely to affect the socioeconomics of different people as the produced capital also declines.
Thank you very much, Nick. Last but not least, Stuart is coming back and is saying great focus on local enterprises. Can we also here consider ways to ensure that investment architecture for medium and small enterprises, particularly local green enterprises, are evolved to enable these critical actors to secure investment?
No, I think I agree with Stuart. You know, they're great ideas, but what happens is that when now we are moving it from the ideas to actualization, then at that stage we can upscale some activities. For instance, right now you find that the example I gave, the communities there are producing milk and they're giving it to a company that's going to process it, maybe in Nairobi. Maybe moving forward, they can be empowered to be able to undertake their own milk processing, packaging, and exporting. We have the African free trade area now, and therefore, instead of bringing the milk even maybe this side of Kenya from Mount Elgon, they can send it to other parts of Uganda, South Sudan, and so on. So those possibilities as to what you're talking about are there. It's only that it's not possible to discuss them fully under such a short period of time. But the idea is in the action plan, and maybe if we have opportunity to engage you in also giving ideas on that action plan, then some of those ideas can be captured.
Thank you very much, Nick. I think we have tried to cover all the questions that were asked in the chat, but I think now we should open up the floor for members who wants to directly engage and ask questions or provide comments. Kamweti, you'll help me to know who has raised their hand, but I can see that Mr. Eugene Itua has raised his hand. Please, Kamweti, help him to unmute, and then he can come and ask his questions or provide his clarification and comments.
Sure thing. Eugene Itua, I think you can try to unmute. If you have a question, you see your hand is raised or comment.
Eugene, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, maybe he has trouble with unmuting, or?
Can you unmute him?
No, I cannot.
Okay, so I think we will proceed and go to anyone. Dear participants, if you have any question, comment, clarification, or any contribution, please, the floor is open.
And attendees, you can feel free to add more questions, even comments to the Q&A box. That's fine.
So as we wait for members to maybe pose their questions, Dr. Nick, I would like for us to go ahead and think through this and see some of other compelling questions and actions. So yes. What is your call today in terms of what is your call today on action and why?
Okay, so you're challenging me with very appropriately. Thank you very much. I think I can say I've got 3 call to action today, and the first one is at the is to ask the countries to work collaboratively. We need to think landscape wide and act in a transboundary way, so that we believe, we begin to view ourselves as part of interconnected system, and therefore understand how both impact and benefit from these shared resources. I think that's particularly important component, because then ultimately we want to understand how we can unite around shared solutions and better conserve and sustainably develop these interdependent resources. And when we do that, then we can be more efficient in working across boundaries, but also across sectors. And the second one, perhaps, which I'd like to say is that we need to create economic incentives for conservation in the public sector. We need to work with the public sector to ensure that there's economic incentive for conservation. And one approach of doing this is what we call the ecological fiscal transfers. This is where we transfer money from the national government to the subnational government, who are actually effectively managing ecological systems. Yeah, because you find that the conservation areas, these areas, that the natural infrastructure is at subnational level, and we need to ensure that we encourage or we incentivize this subnational government to conserve them. And the only way they can do that is if we have a system of determining that, oh, they're doing a good job in conserving this, so we need to bring money from the national government to the subnational government to do that. But at the same time, we need a situation whereby the subnational government come up with plans that have just biodiversity conservation as part of the overall development for that particular area. And I must say that actually, if Uganda has a policy on national biodiversity and ecosystem index. I don't know whether they're applying it, but if they're applying it, then they're on the right path. And other, partner states need to consider that because that is a way of, actualizing ecological fiscal transfers. Then the third action is that we need to empower communities. That's very important. We need to empower communities, and we do this by diversifying the economic basis. At the moment, many communities have been impacted substantially from this COVID. And because they don't have that resilience to the COVID, they don't have resilience to climate change. And then what that leads to is that we get more over-extraction in these natural areas. People are, going back to bushmeat, for instance, and Kenya Wildlife Service reported that there was a substantial increase in bushmeat offtake following the COVID component. So we need to empower them so that we build resilience, so they can build resilience on, against some of these components. And to do that, we perhaps need to ensure that we have the private sector involved in this and coming up with these innovative approaches on nature-based solutions, because the government won't have enough money to do that. And the private sector can actually do that and make money from doing that so that everybody wins. The private sector is making money, the community is empowered, and therefore we have better human well-being in the region, better livelihoods, better food security, better food security, but there's also benefits to the ecosystem. So maybe that's what I can say.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for those very great call to actions. So let's get back to the participants. I can see Stuart has raised his hand. Please, Stuart, if you can hear us, unmute and bring make your contributions, please.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Stuart.
Thank you, Nick, for a great presentation. I love to see the economist in you shining forward here. Just two comments which relate to one another. The first is the use of social discounting has been with us for a long time, and the idea of using carbon pricing is good, but I would just point out that I think it does assume a lot. I'm wondering if there is a way that we can enhance the perceived value by society in terms of demand. If you are forced to migrate, or if you lose your resilience, it becomes actually very, very personal. And there is a sense that social action and social engagement perhaps needs to be factored in here. So I'm wondering, much as I see your 69 US cents per metric ton, I personally feel it's probably way understated because there are a lot of intangibles in there. And while I appreciate you trying to put a number on that in order to make the business case, I think perhaps we're understating it. And when I get down then to think about the people that are affected, the reason I liked your focus on SMEs is, let's take Uganda, for example. 90% of employment in Uganda is provided through SMEs. And a substantial proportion of Uganda's GDP comes from SMEs. And they already face huge, huge challenges to be able to access investment, whether it's a loan or whether it's capital or equity. It's really, really difficult for them. And when they try to become green and sustainable, it's even higher because innovation risks, all sorts of stuff. So I would love to work with you more on how we can reduce obstacles to MSMEs and how we can reduce obstacles to green triple bottom line enterprises. I think there probably needs to be a shift in the financial architecture to make sure that investment is made available, perhaps through guarantee schemes, perhaps through incentives towards banks to lend small. I think there's a huge range of work in there. And the Green Economy Coalition would be very interested to engage with you on this, to take this agenda forward. Thank you.
Peter, I think Stuart was, his was a comment really adding value to what we are saying. And I want to appreciate Stuart very much. I want to find a way of engaging with them beyond this particular webinar. But I just needed to, maybe comment on the social cost of
please
carbon.
go ahead. Yeah.
I agree that it's actually like quite low, but it's used generally for policy making by government. So when it comes to now, determining the amount of carbon for maybe a payment for ecosystem services approach, then we go to the carbon markets. Now, carbon markets will the value will definitely be slightly higher at that level, because now there'll be those components that Stuart is talking about is taken into consideration, so that we can have a situation where we look at the carbon stock, and then you look at the issue of climate change, and then you look at the socioeconomic, the socioeconomy of that particular region, and that one will have higher value. So the community is likely to have better value for that. But the social cost of carbon should not be used for that purpose. This is just for policy decision. For instance, if the government want to change regulation on climate change issues, or on climate action, or on energy and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Peter, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick, for such inputs and recognition of Stuart's contribution. Just Nick, before we come to the conclusion of this session, I just wanted you to reflect on, what do you consider the most critical finding for policy uptake in the current East African region based on the project and the findings? And to add up to that question, it's the follow-up question: how scalable is this study information in terms of NCA implementation across Africa?
Wow, okay, thank you. I think what I must say is that the most critical finding is that these particular landscapes are very valuable, not just for the direct monetary value we get from them, but more valuable because of what they're regulating for us, what they're stopping from happening to the region. And therefore, in this case, I think maybe the most relevant one, given that there's COP26 coming up, is the carbon. I think the carbon, because what we found in this particular study is that the stored carbon in this for landscape, we estimated, of course, social cost of carbon, we estimated it at 600 billion in value, 600 billion, and that is in avoided climate impact to the globe. So I think that is something that is important. And also talking about what Stuart was talking about, we need to really now start thinking about the carbon stock at very localized areas. We see how we can move into the voluntary carbon markets and maybe develop projects that are around REDD+ and around other payment for ecosystem services. Like, for example, we can have investment that will lead into, say, forest landscape restoration or pasture land restoration. And in that restoration process, there's still carbon in the soil, and we can still get value for that carbon in the soil. We can value that carbon, and the community uses this for their pasture, but they still get money for the carbon that soil is capturing. And that is just better management of the area. Now, in terms of scalability, I believe that whether you go to West Africa, whether you go to South Africa or Central Africa, you'll find a lot of natural infrastructure, and this natural infrastructure would be straddling boundaries. Cameroon, Nigeria, for instance, have got a major area there of natural area. So we could apply similar approach in generating evidence that can help those particular cohesive groups to come up with plans that are sustainable, just based on the evidence we can generate. So it's very much scalable across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Such an exciting presentation, a lot of information, very interactive from all participants. We've seen a lot of discussions in the chat, and we thank you very much, Nick, from calling on action to the policy uptake, and then to how scalable this is to other regions. This is exciting, and I'm very sure that all the members here have got one or two takeaway on their side. Now, allow me, because we are remaining with only 2 minutes for us to come to the conclusion of this. I would like to call again Ms. Kihenyo and Ms. Noreen to come and maybe give some reflections and take our message to the participants. I'll start with Ms. Kihenyo. Please, can you share your reflections and take our messages?
Excuse me, Peter. Ms. Chihenyo had to step out, but I can see her colleague, Brian. Brian, if you don't mind, and I'm sorry about the ambush, you can just give your closing remarks. I'm sorry about that.
Please go ahead, Brian.
Wow.
Sorry. Kamuti, please unmute Brian.
Would you like me to go first to give Brian a second to compose himself, because he was
That's a brilliant idea, Noreen.
So Nick, thank you so much. What a fascinating and really a meaty presentation. So much technical detail. The economic analysis is so robust. You can see this from the level of detailed questions that you're getting and your very comprehensive responses. It really is a report and an analysis that has a lot of solid data and analysis behind it. Second, I would like to say it's although the message is sober, you have such a positive approach to it. You give suggestions, enterprises, funding models. You explain how we can focus more on the regulating systems. Another thing I liked is there's a tendency to think that it's all about tourism, and you show that tourism, while 11% of the total value, there's so much more importance to the water flow, the water quality, soil erosion, crop pollutants, the carbon storage, which the loss loss of carbon storage leads to climate change impacts. That affects people on the ground in Africa. And the other thing I thought was so interesting was even as high as $10.9 billion is, the global impact is so much greater in the global value. So many important points, such a good and interested and committed list of participants who are and attendees who are commenting. I agree with some lady who said forgive me, one of the participants, I don't recall the name now, this must be shared at more forums, and I hope that you'll be sharing it at many more forums. We thank you so much, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. So back now over to Brian, and thank you again, Nick, and thanks, Peter, for coordinating.
Great. Okay, thank you for that upgrade. I felt like I was traveling in economy and all of a sudden I was upgraded to business class. So I just want to take this opportunity to really appreciate, first and foremost, the speakers. And starting with you, Noreen, from the World Bank, we really appreciate the input that you've provided and the context in terms of us being able to connect and link the work that we are doing across the region. And I think that is the purpose of having such kind of a conversation, so that we do not work in our silos, but are able to synergize around issues of common interest. So we really want to say a big thank you to you and your team at the World Bank. We look forward to engaging with you at a later date in terms of how these results can be taken forward in terms of implementation. I also want to thank our very competent partners that have been rigorously undertaking this assessment. I think it has been a long journey, starting from the process of just identifying the priority areas and the transboundary ecosystems that have been considered. And we've walked this journey for quite a while now, and I think we are getting traction in terms of the good results that are coming out, and also the level of consultations that have so far been undertaken, just to make sure that the data that is being used and the results that are being that are coming out of this study are validated by the experts in the various sectors and in the country. So we want to say a big thank you to you, Nick and team. I think you've done a good job, and we hope that these findings will be able to go to the next phase based on the call of action that you're giving. So I don't want to take much. I think most of the technical conversations have already been done, and they've been captured in terms of improving this. So just also to appreciate all the participants that have attended this webinar for your inputs and for your great contribution. We do hope that this will be used in terms of, will be used to improve and even just advance, even as we get into the dissemination phase. So with that, allow me to stop there and get back to you, Mr. Peter. And also to thank you, Peter, for such good moderation. So we really appreciate your contribution to the success of this webinar. Well done, and good evening, good morning to you all.
Thank you all. And just to make sure that you know that the presentations and the recordings will be shared with all of you after this webinar. Thank you so much, and have a good day, and have good evening, good morning. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.